Remember that guy who used to come to camp? Were you at camp over there? The guy who talked about all the stuff in creation. Did you go to camp over at Willow Valley? Mike and Terry won't be here today. They got 3 shots Friday: COVID, RSV, and flu. Wonderful. I knew better than take those shots. Are you waiting on me? Yes. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and have a word of prayer to get started. We are going to pray for Israel this morning. That's important, I think. And just for God's protection. And one thing about it, you don't really mess with Israel because they don't put up with it. So they've got good leadership, and they got a big God too. So anyway, let's go ahead and we'll pray and get going here. Thank you for coming. Thanks for those watching Sunday school this morning online. Father, be with us. We just finding out that Terry and Mike are not well this morning, and pray you would be with them, touch and strengthen them in a very, very special way. Help them get to feeling better. Lord, I pray that you would be with the folks there in Israel. I pray that you might protect them. I pray that you'd be with them as they set out to defend themselves. And I pray that this war that they are now involved in, that you would give them victory in that war. So just be with them and be with those families that lost loved ones, and all the damage, destruction that's been done. Just be with them in a special way, and help us as their friends to be and do whatever they need. Now, Lord, be with us. Bless our Sunday school hour with Kevin as he teaches here in a little bit. And bless the singing this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.
You'll stand with me, page 40, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. We'll do the first and last. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so near. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. You'll flip through to 373. The sun's coming up. And do the whole thing. All 2 verses. Sing it out. Once again I face Satan this morning, and I battled him all the day. my weakness, God sent reinforcements. And at sundown, I sang victory song. And the sun's coming up in the morning. Every tear will be gone from my eyes. This old clay's gonna give way to glory. And like an eagle, I'll take to the sky. In a world filled with doubts and confusion, it's so hard when you don't understand. Oh, but I'll on solid foundation, and I'll hold to an unchanging hand. And the sun's coming up in the morning. Every tear will be gone from my eyes. This old clay's gonna give way to glory. And like an eagle, I'll take to the sky. Good singing.
All righty, go ahead and be seated. Offerings this morning. You got the can back there that has to do with missions and printing of tracts. You've got our church building up yonder here that has to do with building fund. And so if you'd like to give to either one of those things as your Sunday school offering, please do. If you've got something that is your tithe or missions, you can wait and put that in there in just a little bit, and that'll be okay. I think we'll just leave it at that. Kevin's going to come and get us into our Sunday school lesson this morning. So Kevin, head on this way.
All right. So I'm going to do a little something different this week. Have a little. We're going to talk about an amazing creation. So the only Bible verse I've got is Genesis 2, verse 7. Didn't even mark this. So Genesis 2, verse 7, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So today I'm just going to talk about a little bit about what God created when he did this. This is the only description of how God created the human body, and I figured I would talk about some of the unique things and amazing things that take place in our human body, and talk a little bit about creation versus evolution and how amazing our body is. Just studying just a few things, basic things about our human body, and how evolution is just crazy to think that this randomly happened. And like I said, in the Bible, this is kind of the only description of how God created the human body. Just dust from the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. So that's the only description God took. He took dust and turned it into an amazing human being. So just a few things about, so I'm going to start with the brain. Love my beautiful pictures here. I'm an artist in the works here. So when we're cold, some examples like when hikers are out hiking and they get freezing, even when you go out in the cold, right, and you don't wear the proper clothing, the hypothalamus initiates emergency systems. So when you're cold, what happens to you? You start shivering. So this is the body's reaction to try to warm you up. So why this happens is the muscles, when they're being using your muscles, they create heat when they're being used. So when you're sitting around doing nothing, your muscles aren't in use and you get cold. So in order to get your muscles going, if you're not going to start running or doing some physical activity and your body is cold, it's going to make you start shivering. And so all your muscles are going to start firing in order to create heat, to heat you up, to warm up your body. So your body has an automatic system that says, well, if you're not going to do something to warm yourself up, then I'm going to make all your muscles just start sporadically going off and make you shiver in order to warm myself up. Another thing that happens is your blood vessels, so just under your skin. So if you were to go out and look at when you're really warm and you look at your hand or your arm, you can see your blood vessels on the top of your skin. You can see them. But if you were to go out in freezing cold weather and wear short sleeves for a little while, you'd be able to look at your arm and you would not see those vessels anymore because your skin is going to constrict and those blood vessels are going to constrict and they're going to go deeper into your body and go underneath your skin. And that is just keeping your blood flow and keeping and loss of heat, constricting your body and that blood and keeping that blood closer into your skin to keep you warmer. And that's something that's just a natural reaction that our body has to keep ourselves warmer and to keep your body heat up. And if you stay out in the cold too long, so like people who, are in an avalanche and they get buried, and as they sit there waiting for somebody to be able to find them in the middle of an avalanche when they've been buried, your body will start focusing on taking blood to just the essential parts, so your heart, your brain, your lungs, and that kind of stuff. So what will happen is your fingers and toes aren't essential for survival, right? You can live, if you had no hands or no feet and you were buried in an avalanche, you could still survive. So the blood slows down and stops circulating so much in your extremities, so your feet and hands. And this is why oftentimes frostbite comes in, because there's no blood flow, no warmth going to it, no blood flow going to it. And if that continues for a long time, then frostbite can seep in, and sometimes if that lasts too long, then you'll end up losing fingers or toes or hands or whatever. And that's the body just, again, preserving the essential parts. It's circulating that heat and that blood to the brain, the heart, and the lungs, and the essential things to keep you alive. So just amazing that how the body can do all that. And then at times, so there are times and some examples of soldiers at war or people who are out. One example that I found was a hiker who fell down off a cliff. And they broke their leg, and they had bleeding here and there, but they felt no pain. And our body, your brain can block and release endorphins to be able to block serious pain. So, I know I'm a wimp, so if I get a cut, I'm yelling, it hurts. But there are people in extreme circumstances who will fall and break legs or, puncture a lung or break ribs, and they'll be able to get up and walk to a local trail or out in the open to be able to find help, to be able to survive. And that's your brain kicks in and says, I know it's in pain, I know you're hurting, but it shuts it off and says we need to focus on being able to survive. And if you're writhing in pain, you're not going to be able to hike to a trail or find help or yell for help. So your brain knows this and shuts off that pain receptors and says, all right, let's be able to walk, let's be able to crawl or whatever, to be able to go find help. And then once we're in help, your brain automatically says, okay, now I'm good. I see that the helicopter is coming, or that person's on their phone calling 911, and it'll shut that off, and then that person will start writhing in pain, and that receptors will be turned off, and then they'll start feeling pain because they need to know that, hey, my ribs are broken, or my leg is broken, don't try to use it. So those pain receptors are an important part of our body telling us, hey, there's something wrong in this area, you need to get this looked at. But it's able to shut it off. So it's amazing without us, we don't have to tell our brain or think about, hey, I need to ignore this pain and to be able to do this to get help to survive. Your brain automatically will recognize the situation and shut those off and then turn them back on when necessary. And it's just amazing how that is done. And the same thing with soldiers. So if you're in the middle of a battle and you got shot in the leg, you can't just stop and say, well, hold on, everybody hold up. I need to wrap my leg and get it taken care of, get this bullet taken out. They can't do that. They're in the middle of a battle. So they can block that pain out and continue fighting, or go to the back of the line to be able to get that taken care of, to take care of their fellow soldiers or to finish the battle. And then that pain receptor will turn back on, and they will feel that pain, and then they can go to the medical doctors or whatever and get that taken care of. And that's, again, our brain being able to turn off and realize when you need to feel that pain and when you need to not feel that pain. And then again, another thing is when we're in intense situations, our body can do another amazing things. So another example I found is somebody was bicycling through the wilderness, and they came across a bear cub, and mama was right there. So immediately, adrenaline kicks in, right? So they can run faster than that bear, or be able to fight that bear off if it starts attacking them. You read and used to hear all the time about moms who would lift cars off of their kids and be able to pull their kids out from, cars that weigh a ton. And, these little moms would be able to lift this car up just high enough for somebody to be able to pull their child out. Well, that's, the fight or flight our body takes on and kicks in necessary things, chemicals and adrenaline to be able to do things that normally, you could offer that same mom a month later and say, I'll give you $1 trillion if you can lift this car, and they wouldn't be able to do it because the brain just hasn't kicked in that there's that need. They don't even think about it. I'm trying to lift a car, that's ridiculous. There's no way I could lift a car. Just the adrenaline kicks in, and they're able to do that kind of stuff to save a life. Just amazing thing that kicks in. And then our brain is ever changing and adapting to our needs. Without growing, obviously our brain doesn't get any bigger as we grow. It's contained inside of our skull, so it can't get bigger as we grow and get smarter and learn things. So it's constantly having to change. So what you use the most, often that section of the brain is going to grow, but something else has to shrink to compensate for that. So an example is somebody who learns piano. They learn how to play piano. So their fingers and their touch and fingers and their musical abilities, those sections of the brains will grow, and something else will start to shrink. And another good example is people who are deaf or dumb. Their other senses will kick up, and they'll have much better sense of hearing or smell or touch or taste because those other senses compensate for the loss of the sight or the hearing that they're missing. So so that part, if they have no eyesight, that part of the brain will shrink down to almost nothing. And their other sections will be larger than a normal person's who has that sense. And then some things moving down, so we go to our heart. It pumps, the heart pushes blood through 1,500 miles of blood vessels, and it beats 100,000 times a day, nonstop. And then I just did it, so if you live to be 75, that's 27,375 days your heart has to work nonstop. So if you take that times how many times a day average, that's almost 3 billion times in a life. When you live to be 75, 3 billion times your heart will beat without stop. There's no pausing. When you sleep, it's still going. No matter what you're doing, your heart doesn't stop. So it's going 3 billion times nonstop. So you think of other things. So if you were to do any other activity, after a while, you would tire out and not be able to do it continuously. Even, something simple as tapping your finger. You could probably do it for an hour, maybe 2 hours, but after a while, your finger would get tired, even just tapping your finger, and you would not be able to do it continuously because those muscles are not designed for that. But your heart was designed to stop and never wear out. That muscle never stops, never gets a pause, just continuously goes. And it's got special nerves that never tire out. And then there's an electrical impulse also that makes your heart beat, created by special cells that stimulate the muscles in the upper chamber of the heart to continue, and then it moves down to the lower chamber of our heart to make it contract. So a normal heartbeat isn't thump, it's thump, 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 thump. And that's the upper, then the lower, and firing in continuation, one after the other. And this goes all day and night, nonstop. And then it speeds up and slows down as needed, right? So if you're going to go off running a marathon, your heart's going to pick up and beat faster. And if you're sleeping at the end of the night or sitting watching TV, it doesn't need to pump as much, so it slows down, and that's all controlled automatically without us having to think about it. And it gets no break, and it's not even allowed to malfunction, right? So if your heart malfunctions, you're probably going to end up in the hospital or worse if it malfunctions. And then when you do run the marathon, so as you're running the marathon, it's going to kick up and do faster. But as soon as you're done running that marathon, and you're back in the car driving home, your heart is going to slow back down and say, okay, I don't need it. So it turns up and turns down automatically based off of what you're doing and what the needs of your body is. So something that just how amazing that it is that our mind controls, how amazing our brain is. Just try to think if you had to tell your heart when to beat and how your lungs to breathe. So if you just thought, okay, heartbeat, 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 breathe in, heartbeat, heartbeat, breathe out, heartbeat, heartbeat, breathe in, heartbeat, heartbeat, breathe out. And just try to do that and think, feel your pulse and just think, every time your heart beats, think beat, beat. And then every time you take a breath in or breath out, if you sat there and tried to do that, it would be very hard. I've tried it. To just focus, turn everything else out, and just focus on every time, think, beat, beat, breathe in, beat, beat, breathe out. It's so difficult to just think in your mind to control, if that was your thought and that was what was controlling your heart and lungs, was you telling it, beat, beat, breathe in, breathe out, beat, beat, breathe. You wouldn't be able to survive. You would die after a couple of minutes because it's very difficult to try to concentrate and to focus on just that. But throughout our lives, think of how many other things we're doing, and you never have to think about, heartbeat, heartbeat, breathing in, breathing out. It's all automatically controlled nonstop, and it kicks up and kicks down as needed without a thought whatsoever to us. And if you were in control of it, there would be nobody around because it's nearly impossible. At least for me. Maybe you're better at controlling that stuff and keeping up with it. But I tried it for a while, and I couldn't last more than a minute or two trying to think of it. It's just amazing how our brain can do that. And then you think of people who are doing, multitasking. They're breathing, heart's beating, and they're driving a car or texting on the phone and listening to the radio and thinking about what they're going to go off and do, right? So their brain is doing so many things at one time, and it's just amazing that it can't stop and say, well, we need to think about where this driving. I can't focus on, we're going to turn the heartbeat thing off and focus on the driving. I'm going to turn this breathing off. It can't do that. And it's just amazing how many directions our brain can do all at the same time without pausing even for a second, thinking about when our heart's going to beat or when our lungs need to breathe. So then when I was in the hospital, so my heart stopped for 9 seconds, which caused me to pass out. Of course, so your instant reaction when your heart stops beating, it made me fall down because your blood is, so when your heart starts beating, it's your body says, okay, I need blood to the brain. So then that causes you to pass out, which makes you lie flat because your heart is down here and your brain is up here, so your heart has to beat and take stuff up. If your heart's not beating, the only way to get blood to your brain is if you're lying flat or your head is below your heart, and that's going to get circulation going. So when your heart stops, that's why people pass out and it's your body's instant reaction to try to get you flat. So it makes it easier on the heart to kick back in and to get blood to your brain, because that is what keeps you alive. If there was no blood flow to your brain were to stop, you would die pretty quickly. And then, so in my case, so when my heart started got me laying flat, it kicked back in, and instead of the heartbeat doing the top chamber, bottom chamber, like a normal heartbeat, thump, 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 mine was misfiring and going off in different times. So the top would fire and then the bottom would fire later, and then they would fire at the same time, and so it would be like thump, 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 thump. It's kind of what my heart sounds like if you were listening to it while it was out of rhythm. So if you were listening to my heart, it sounds like I was running a marathon. And if you were to grab somebody in the middle of a marathon and listen to their heartbeat, that's what my heart was sounding like. Even though I was laying in a hospital bed, it was beating 140, 150 beats per minute as I'm laying. Normal while resting for a human is 60 to 100, somewhere in there, depending on how fit you are and how healthy your heart is. And mine was doing 140, 150 while I'm resting. But that's because the two chambers were not going in action. It wasn't thump, 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 thump. It was going in two different times. So there was no coordination between themselves. And the amazing thing is, to fix that, all they did was kind of slow my heartbeat down, give me medicine that would make my heartbeat slow down, and get my blood pressure up higher. And my heart automatically just went back into rhythm and just corrected itself. There was no medicine that they could give me to correct that. It was just something that they just slowed the heart rate down, and the heart just automatically went back to its normal beating. But if it hadn't, the other option is to send an electrical shock, right? So that's what makes our heart beat, is an electrical shock goes to your heart, the body generates, that goes to the upper chamber, then the lower chamber. So the other option that was out there to get me back in the normal heartbeat is literally an electrical shock that would send an impulse to that heart to kind of get it back in rhythm, to send it and coordinate those two. And then some other things. So the heart starts beating at 5 weeks in life. So you think how, out of a 9-month time, the baby's in the womb, at 5 weeks is when the heart starts beating. But the lungs aren't used until the baby's actually born. So inside the mother's womb, the lungs are not used whatsoever, obviously. There's no air in there, right? So there is a hole that the blood does not go to the lungs. There's a hole that is created that bypasses the lungs and goes to the rest of the body while the baby is in the womb. But as soon as it's born and the baby takes that first breath of air and those lungs inflate, that hole is closed up. And then as the baby is born and as it grows over the next couple of days, that hole is sealed off for the rest of your life. And everything runs normal for the next 3,000 or so days of that baby's life. But while it's in the womb, the lungs aren't used at all, and there's a hole, literally a hole, in the baby's blood system that bypasses it. And I just think that's amazing creation. That and how evolution could ever explain how in the womb there's a hole that bypasses the lungs to not use something that if our lungs stopped working, we would die fairly quickly. But the baby does it for 9 months in the womb and doesn't use its lungs whatsoever because of this hole is created. And then it has to be sealed, automatically when the baby is born, because now it has to use the lungs. There's not that option of depending on the mother for those things that it needs to survive. And it's just amazing that it would do that. Some other interesting facts. So 2,000 gallons of blood is pumped during the course of your day. And you think of how much that is. That is a lot of blood that is pumped during the course of your day. If you were to take all your blood vessels out of the human body and put them end to end, it would go 2 times around the earth. If you went along around the equator, it would wrap around the entire earth 2 times. And then there's one place that gets the blood vessels go to every single part of your body except for one place in your entire body. Anybody know what that one place would be? It doesn't get any blood. You're all using it right now. No, not your ears. The tip of your eye, your cornea, so that clear spot that goes over top of your eye, protecting your cornea and your iris and everything, that clear spot gets no blood, right? So if it did get blood, there'd be a little vein that goes across your vision that you would see this blood vessel line going no matter what you looked at. So there's no blood going to your cornea. I thought that was interesting because, we think, blood needs to go to everything, right? That's what keeps our cells alive, and how it gets oxygen and nutrients and stuff goes to all that. So I thought that was pretty interesting, the fact that that's the one place that it doesn't go. And to just think of how how any of this could have been developed during evolution, the fight and flight thing, and be able to turn your heart rate up and down without us having to think about it. I mean, how would that develop? The hole in your blood system that avoids your lungs while you're in the womb, and then once you take that first breath, and that being turned off, that hole being closed off for the rest of your life and not being used. Just amazing how evolution could ever explain those kind of things. Your brain being able to adapt into what your circumstances are. So if you're blind or deaf or mute or whatever, adapting to that and creating overriding systems that would increase your other senses. Be able to turn off pain receptors to your brain, and creating ways to keep you warm. So if you're cold, the shivering and reducing and condensing, constricting your blood vessels, and that. Just amazing how all those things are created. And of course we could go, these are just some basic stuff that is in the human body, and we think of, animals have a lot of these same kind of things created very similar. And God just used, as we read, formed of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So God created all this stuff out of dust. And how evolution could ever explain all these amazing things. It's just amazing how complex the human body is, that God created, and simply out of dust. And he created all these things that keep us alive, and emergency stuff that, the shivering and your blood vessels constricting, pain receptors being blocked, adrenaline being pumped, and all these different things that God created in our bodies to keep us alive in extreme circumstances that, probably most people will probably never be in any of those situations, won't be buried in an avalanche or have to pick up a car or be in intense pain and still have to be able to crawl or hike or whatever to find rescue or find help, or be in a war and still be able to fight the battle with a gunshot wound somewhere. Probably most people will never have to deal with any of those kind of things, but every single one of us has that ability built into us just in case it ever were to happen. It's just amazing that is there, and how God created all that to have the human body be prepared for any situation and be able to have an emergency situation ready to go to deal with any of these different circumstances that we could find ourselves in, and be able to continue keep us alive, even at maybe the loss of fingers or toes or whatever, just to keep us alive. I don't know, just amazing to me. If you study, and you could go into animals, I've studied and done with the teens at one point. I did a study on different animals and plants. If you just kind of dig into how amazing, even a blade of grass is. We cut grass every single year. We cut grass, I don't know, 20, 30 times during the course of the summer. We cut grass. If you did that to any other plant, if you took a tree and just chopped it down at the trunk, you would kill the tree. It wouldn't come back up and grow, continue to grow, and you cut it again. Or, you think of flowers. If you even touch a flower, you're going to kill it, right? How hard it is to keep a beautiful flower. But yet grass, we chop it with dull blades over and over and over, weekly, sometimes more than a week, and it just keeps growing back over and over and over again. And it's just amazing, and actually makes it healthier and thicker and better when we cut it, as opposed to letting it grow. It gives it a much better root system to be able to survive and tolerate. And then another good example that I like to use is a hummingbird. Its tongue actually wraps around its brain to protect it. And you think of or not a hummingbird, a woodpecker. And you think of what a woodpecker does, right? He bangs his head all day long, he pounds his beak into a tree to dig out worms and ants and stuff like. So he is constantly banging his head up against the tree. And so God has created, and the weirdest thing, his tongue to wrap around his brain in order to protect his brain. Because if you banged your head on a wall, you would have a headache. If you did it 100 times, you would be probably partially brain dead if you did it over and over. And think a woodpecker does it, and you think about that sound of a woodpecker banging. He does it, 8 times in a minute maybe, in a couple of seconds. And you think he does that all day long. His entire life goes from tree to tree, digging holes in trees and just pecking away at it. His brain would be mush if we did half of that. But yet God has created his weirdest thing, his tongue, to wrap around his brain to cushion it. So it's got a cushion. So when it goes, it's hitting up against his tongue, literally his tongue, and cushioning his brain from getting brain damage. Just amazing why evolution would ever explain why a tongue of all different things would wrap around a brain. But that's just the amazing thing that God created. He created the woodpecker to do that, and just created that unique situation for that, and to keep that woodpecker alive. Created that. And like I said, you can pick any kind of, and you just start thinking about different creations that God has made, and just dig into, pick any kind of random plant, animal, human body system, whatever, and just kind of study it a little bit. And it's just amazing how it works without any outside influence. Our brain controls our heartbeat and our breathing without us having to think about it. It's just completely automated thing. I don't know, just amazing the creation that God created and how intense and intricate it is, no matter what you look at, and how evolution could think. I don't care if you had 6 million years to create something. I would never think of wrapping a tongue around a brain to insulate it, or to be able to have in your brain sensors that would indicate whether you need to turn pain on or off, or to increase heart rate based off of. I would never come up with that kind of stuff if you gave me 1 million years. But yeah, God thought of it all in an instant, in a single breath out of dust. He created all these different things. And then the last thing I like to always think of, creation, they say, well, it just randomly happened. There was a single cell, and then there's multiple cell, and stuff just kind of built one upon the other. And I always think, if I took a bag of Legos, took a Lego set and threw it in a bag and said, here you go, you can't touch it, you got to shake this bag, and at some point you need to create this set. Let's say it's a police car, although you wouldn't be able to know what it is, right? Creation didn't have the end design of a human being or a tree or a frog or whatever in mind. It just randomly happened, and somehow it ended up. So I just hand you a random bag of Legos and say, all you can do is shake it. You can shake it any way, anyhow you want. You're not allowed to open the bag. You're just allowed to shake it. That's all you can do. How long and how many times would you be able to shake that bag before you said, well, there you go. There's your creation right there. You could shake it a trillion times. I don't care how many times you shake it. You're never going to get those Lego parts to connect in the correct spot, in the correct way, in the order, in order to get that creation. Half the people you give them the instruction manual, and they could touch the pieces, and they still probably couldn't do it. Let alone trying to have no clue what you're trying to build, what it's supposed to be, and you're not allowed to touch a single part. But that's what creationists want us to believe, is they took the world just took a big Lego bag and shook it up for billions of years, and voila, there's this human body, and there's this woodpecker, and there's your heart and your brain and your lungs, and it's just amazing to me to think of how anybody could believe that they just shook it up and somehow all this just happened to work perfectly, and how all these systems work together in coordination. It's just amazing to me. So I don't know. Just thought I'd have a little different. And all God had to say was, I took dust, molded it, and breathed air into it. That's all it took for him. That's all we need to know. And we could study. I mean, there are doctors who study medical stuff for 12 years to learn just one little, just how the brain works, and they still know very little of how the brain actually works. And God just said, there it is.